My name is Samantha Hayes. I'm 39 years old, and I've served my country for nearly 2 decades. But on that Tuesday morning, standing in the fluorescent lit hallway of Ridgeview Medical Center, I was just the jobless daughter in my father's eyes. "Don't mind her," he told the doctor with a casual wave. "Samantha doesn't really work. She just hangs around, plays soldier or something." The words weren't shouted, but they hit with the force of a slap. "Doctor?" Alan glanced at me, unsure whether to smile politely or ignore the comment, and settled for pretending I wasn't there at all. I stood next to the water cooler in worn sneakers, faded jeans, and a navy zip-up hoodie. My hair was pulled back in a no-nonsense bun, no makeup, no badge, no indication of rank. Just another woman in civilian clothes who looked like she had nothing better to do than hover around a hospital. My father, Robert Hayes, spoke with the ease of someone used to controlling every room he walked into. He built a successful construction business from scratch, had 3 kids, and never let anyone forget how hard he worked to provide for us. At that moment, he was speaking with 2 doctors and a hospital administrator about my mother's stroke, cutting them off, demanding answers, rattling off insurance details like he was negotiating a corporate deal. I'd flown in from Washington less than 12 hours earlier. I hadn't even changed out of the clothes I'd worn on the flight. There was no time. I went straight from the airport to the ICU when I heard how bad Mom's condition was. But none of that mattered. Not to him. "She lives in DC now," he continued, chuckling. "Says she works with the military or the government or something. Never really clear what she does." He looked over at me then for just a second, with that smirk I knew so well, the one he wore when he was about to make a joke at my expense. "She tells people she's a colonel," he added, "but I think it's more like a costume party kind of thing." The administrator laughed, awkwardly. I didn't. I'd heard it before, too many times to count. And every time it stung just as much. There was a time I tried to explain what I did. I would share pieces of my work when asked, tell stories from training missions, or deployments carefully edited, of course. But it didn't matter. He never listened long enough to understand. I looked at him now, standing in his crisp button-down shirt and polished loafers, totally in his element. The man who taught me to be tough, to push through pain, to never complain, and the same man who couldn't see me beyond what I wasn't. To the doctors, I was a relative with no job, no place, no authority. Just someone tagging along while the real decisions were being made. My father never introduced me with a title or a role. To him, I was always, "Sam, the middle kid, never really figured out what she wants to do." I should have spoken up. I could have corrected him. I could have told the doctors exactly who I was and what I'd done. But I didn't. Not that day. I just stood there, hands in my hoodie pockets, watching them nod and scribble notes, as if his version of me was all they needed to know. What do you do when the people who raised you choose to believe in a version of you that fits their comfort, not your truth? That morning, I realized something I'd tried to deny for years. My father didn't just misunderstand me. He didn't want to understand. I didn't join the military to make a statement. It wasn't rebellion, and it wasn't a phase. After college, while my siblings went straight into law school and med school, I chose something different, something I'd been quietly planning for years. The Army offered structure, purpose, and challenge. I wanted to test myself, to be part of something bigger. But to my father, I was running from responsibility, not running toward it. When I told him I enlisted, he didn't get angry. He laughed. "You're too soft for boot camp," he said over dinner. "You'll be back in a week, begging for a desk job." He passed the mashed potatoes like we were talking about some silly internship, but I didn't come back. I finished basic, made it through AIT, and got assigned to my first post. Then came promotion to sergeant at 23. Still, no celebration, no, "I'm proud of you." Just a sarcastic remark when I called home. "So now you get to boss people around while doing push-ups?" When I got accepted into officer candidate school, I thought maybe, just maybe, he'd see it differently. Instead, he muttered something about how I was finally growing up and hung up before I could even tell him when the ceremony was. My mom sent a card. My dad sent silence. The years passed, and I moved through the ranks. Second lieutenant. First. Then captain. Eventually, major. Each new stripe, each new responsibility, felt earned. But back home, I stayed frozen in time. At family gatherings, my brother was introduced as our firm's lead counsel. My sister was the head of pediatric oncology. Me? I was still in the army somewhere, like I was wandering in camouflage with no destination, like I'd been lost for a decade. Once, at Thanksgiving, I mentioned I'd just returned from a joint training mission in Germany. My father blinked. "Still playing soldier?" he asked, then launched into a story about his golf game with a state senator. The room shifted back to his comfort zone. I became background noise again. I sent photos once. Not too many. Just a few from a promotion ceremony. One from a change of command event. He glanced at them when I visited and said, "Looks like you went to a costume party." That was the last time I mailed anything home. Even when I started working out of DC, he assumed I was in some office filing forms. He never asked what I actually did. He never wanted to know that I was briefing senior intelligence leaders or coordinating operations with foreign allies. Every time I tried to explain my job, he cut in with something unrelated. I'd say, "We just finished an exercise simulating cyber attacks on strategic infrastructure," and he'd say, "Did you see that new development off Route 42? That's real work." I stopped trying. The funny part? He used to call me his little general when I was a kid. I'd line up toy soldiers by rank and color, and he'd brag to his coworkers, "She's going to run the world someday." Turns out, I almost did. But by the time it was real, he didn't want to see it. He had a version of success that came in suits and handshakes, not in uniforms or deployments. He respected what he understood, and since he didn't understand my world, he decided it wasn't worth respecting. I wasn't bitter, not all the time. But I'd be lying if I said it didn't get to me. Not the lack of praise, the lack of curiosity. Like he didn't even care enough to ask what my days looked like, or who I had become. So I let it go. I kept my updates short. Still working, still moving, everything's fine. And I poured myself into the work, into the missions, into the purpose. Because somewhere along the way, I stopped trying to prove anything to him and started building a life he never saw coming. It was just after 6 p.m. when I got the message. I was sitting at my mother's bedside, holding her hand, listening to the steady rhythm of the machines keeping her stable. Her skin was pale and cold, but her breathing was calm, and for a second, I let myself believe she might pull through. My phone vibrated once, then again. I slipped it out of my pocket and glanced down. A secured message flashed on the screen. "Colonel Hayes, Syria brief rescheduled to 0800. PDB prep at 1400. Confirm availability." My mind started sorting through logistics automatically. I would need to be back in DC by dawn. That meant a 4 a.m. departure at the latest. Maybe sooner, depending on transport. I stayed quiet, calculating silently, when my dad's voice snapped across the room. "For God's sake, Samantha, can you put the damn phone away? Your mother is lying here half dead, and you're checking Instagram?" I blinked. "It's work," I said quietly. He scoffed. "Work. Right." My brother didn't even look up from the medical journal in his lap. Maybe try being here for once, Sam," he muttered. "Just for a minute." My sister stood by the 4-pole, adjusting settings with the confidence of a trained physician. "She's always somewhere else," Melissa said. "Even when she's in the room." I didn't respond. I couldn't. What would I even say? That the message I just received was classified? That I was being summoned to brief the Secretary of Defense and prepare a summary that would land on the president's desk before sunrise? No one here wanted to hear that. To them, I was just the middle child, the odd one out, the one who never quite settled down, never got married, never gave them anything they could explain to their friends. So I said nothing, just slipped the phone back into my hoodie and focused on Mom's hand in mine. She stirred slightly, eyes fluttering. and I leaned in, whispering that I was here, that she wasn't alone. But even as I spoke, I felt the walls closing in. My father was pacing again, arms crossed, muttering under his breath about responsibility and showing respect. "You were always good at running," he said finally. "Every time things get hard, you find some excuse to disappear. Another mission, another trip, more of your imaginary work." My stomach twisted. I looked at him, really looked at him. This man who raised me, who once took me to the park in a tiny camo jacket and called me Little General. Now he stared at me like I was a stranger who'd lied her way into the family. "I'm not disappearing," I said, my voice low. "I have to leave in the morning, but I'll be back." "Sure," he said. "Off to save the world, right?" My brother chuckled without lifting his eyes. My sister just shook her head like I'd disappointed them all over again. I wanted to scream, to shake them and say, "I matter. What I do matters. You don't have to understand it, but you don't get to erase it." Instead, I stood up, kissed my mother's forehead, and walked toward the hallway with my heart pounding in my chest. I was 20 feet from the Secretary of Defense when my phone buzzed again. I ignored it, just like I had the last 16 times. My eyes stayed on the screen in front of me, where a heat map of southern Syria glowed red. The briefing was short, sharp, and serious. We had actionable intel, and I needed to deliver it clean. When it was over, I stepped out, found a quiet corner, and finally checked my phone. 17 missed calls, all from my father. The first few were voicemails I expected, demands, guilt, the usual. But the last one caught me off guard. His voice was strange, tense, almost frightened. "Samantha, something happened at the hospital. A man came looking for you. Military, full uniform. Said he needed to speak to Colonel Hayes." I froze. My operations officer must have dispatched someone when I failed to check in. Protocol. "He had your picture," my dad continued. "He showed it to the nurse and asked if you'd been around. When I said you were just my daughter, he looked confused. Then he called you ma'am and saluted the photo." I pressed the phone tighter to my ear. "Dad," I said. "What did he say exactly?" There was a pause. "He said it was odd for someone in your position to miss a scheduled briefing. He said your unit hadn't been able to reach you. He said you were important." I could hear my dad's breathing change. Shallow. Fast. "I didn't know, Sam. I swear, I didn't know." He kept repeating it, like it could erase the last 15 years. There was silence between us for a moment. Then he asked, "Are you really a colonel? Like a real one?" I swallowed hard. "Yes, Dad, I really am." He didn't speak right away. I could hear voices in the background, hospital sounds. "They said you brief generals, senators, that people listen to you." I nodded, even though he couldn't see me. "They do," I said. Something shifted in his voice. "I thought you were just playing a part." I thought. I thought it was pretend." "It's not," I said. "It never was." The line went quiet again, but I knew, in that moment, something had changed. Maybe not everything, but enough. 2 days later, I walked back into the hospital. This time, I wasn't in jeans and sneakers. I wore my dress blues, crisp and sharp, the silver eagle of a full colonel gleaming on each shoulder. Every step echoed down the hallway as I passed the nurse's station. Heads turned. A few people nodded. Some stood a little straighter. I was used to that reaction. But I wasn't walking into a briefing room. I was walking toward my father. He was sitting beside my mother's bed, flipping through her chart like it was a business report. He didn't see me at first. Not until I stepped into the doorway. Then he looked up. He stood slowly, almost like he wasn't sure what he was seeing. His eyes scanned me from top to bottom. The ribbons, the medals, the combat badge, the airborne wings. The career he never believed was real now stared him in the face. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. I stayed quiet too. I let him take it all in. Let him feel the weight of what he'd spent years dismissing. "You look," he started, then stopped. He shook his head a little. I didn't expect you to look like this. I smiled. Not out of pride, but something closer to relief. This is what I look like at work, Dad. He stepped closer, eyes still locked on the uniform. I talked to your commanding officer, he said. I asked about you. His voice cracked just a little. I wanted to know if everything that man said was true. About the deployments, the operations, all of it. I nodded once. It's true. He looked down, then back at me. I didn't know. I really didn't. I could tell he meant it. For the first time in my life, I could see that he finally saw me. Not the daughter he imagined. The officer I had become. My dad rubbed the back of his neck like he used to when he was nervous. I told your commanding officer I owed you an apology, he said. For everything. For all the years I didn't listen. For making fun of something I didn't even try to understand. I didn't say anything. I wanted to hear the rest. He took a breath, steadied himself, then looked me in the eye. He told me about your deployments. Iraq, Afghanistan, places I only ever saw on the news. His voice dropped lower. He told me you volunteered for the hard assignments, the ones no one wanted. He paused, then added, he said your work saved lives. Oh! I felt something shift in my chest. Not pride, not anger, just release. Like a pressure that had been there for years finally let go. Why didn't you ever tell me all this? He asked, but the question wasn't sharp. It was soft. Wounded. I tried, I said. You just didn't want to hear it. He nodded slowly, like he knew I was right. He looked back at my uniform one more time, then took a single step forward. I thought I knew everything about hard work, he said, but I didn't know what real service looked like until now. And then, with shaky hands, he lifted his arm and gave me a salute. It wasn't perfect. His fingers weren't quite straight. His posture was off. But it was real. It was honest. And it was the first time in my entire adult life that my father looked at me with respect. I swallowed hard, suddenly fighting back tears, not because I needed his approval, but because, for the first time, he saw me. Not the daughter in jeans and a hoodie, not the black sheep. He saw Colonel Samantha Hayes, and he saluted her. I used to think that if I just worked hard enough, if I just achieved one more thing, maybe someone would finally say, "We see you." But years went by. Promotions came and went. I led teams, briefed generals, stood in rooms where decisions changed lives, and still felt invisible at my own family's dinner table. For the longest time, I tried to make them understand. I softened the edges, left out the danger, the weight, the truth. I wanted to be accepted more than I wanted to be understood. But the truth is, I didn't build this life for them. I built it because I believed in something. I believed in doing hard things, in serving a country that didn't always serve me back, in showing up where it mattered most. There were years I felt completely alone. But looking back, I wasn't. I had my team. I had my mission. I had a purpose bigger than needing anyone's approval. My father sees me now. And that matters. But even if he never had, I'd still be who I am. Because I earned this life. Not with words or titles, but with actions no one at home ever saw. I no longer need to explain myself. I don't have to shrink to make others feel comfortable. I've made peace with the silence, with the rooms where I was overlooked, with the people who never asked. They miss the best parts of me, and that's their loss, not mine. There's power in being known. But there's something even stronger in knowing yourself. I don't need to be visible to everyone. I just need to be true to the woman I've become. And for the first time in a long time, I feel free.